Today's episode 99, is brought to us by our Explorer of the Week, Israel. Israel has been with us from the beginning of our Patreon, and we thank you for it. Now, today's episode is all going to be about a guy called Ben Rich. Now, Ben Rich was the second director of Lockheed Martin's Skunkworks. And specifically what this episode is about is a quote from Ben Rich saying, "We now have the technology to take E.T. home." What did he mean by this? Well, thanks to Israel and our other Patreons, we are going to find out. If you too want to be one of our Patreons, all you have to do is go to patreon.com/aliens explored and pick one of our tiers. If it's at tier 3 and above, then you too get to be Explorer of the Week, just like Israel, and we will thank you publicly. Now, let's enjoy episode 99.
Aliens Explored is a weekly podcast exploring famous and obscure cases of UFO sightings, alien abductions, and other strange events from both a believing and a skeptical perspective, whilst keeping an open mind. I'm Stu Jackson, a professional actor and amateur ufologist with a particular interest in the crop circle phenomenon. I'll be debating that otherworldly visitations are real. The truth is out there.
And I'm Neil Kelly. I'm a professional actor as well and used to work for the military as an intelligence analyst. I'll be arguing from a more doubtful point of view. I mean, it's all a bit far-fetched, isn't it? Hello everyone and welcome to Aliens Explored, your weekly look at the mysterious skies, the teeming countless galaxies, the mysterious depths of the bottom of the sea, those smoke-filled rooms and those military black sites. My name is Neil Kelly, I'm one of your presenters.
And I'm your other presenter, Stu Jackson. That's quite a list, Neil.
It's not by any means exclusive or exhaustive. Exhaustive is what I meant.
We could come up with an exhaustive list, could we?
No, our interests are wide and varied, and we go way beyond what we said we would talk about. But this week we're talking about a chap called Ben Rich, who was who worked for Lockheed with their Skunkworks. He was head of their Skunkworks project, wasn't he?
He was indeed, and for anyone that doesn't know what Skunkworks is, it's their advanced development program. It's like R&D, I suppose.
Lockheed will tell you it's the most prestigious engineering post in the history of aviation.
Yes. He was the second director, so from 1975 to 1991. A lot of people consider him to have been the father of stealth technology.
Yes. Yeah. Starting with the U-2 spy plane, and then moving on, he developed the SR-71 Blackbird. But I mean, he started working for Skunkworks back in the 50s, and he designed the. Hey, here's a cool thing. He was awarded a patent for designing a nichrome heating system which prevented Navy patrol plane crew members' penises from freezing to their urine elimination pipes.
That I did not know.
It sounds like a trivial thing, but actually, yeah. Imagine that. You're pain. I mean, do you have to kind of? I mean, when you go up in one of these things, do you have to effectively insert a catheter so that you can, if you're in the air for hours at a time, flying in a holding pattern, air-to-air refueling, you've got this catheter that just enables you to to pee.
Well, I
But
imagine it would be something along the lines of a stadium pal.
But then it gets so cold that your penis sticks to it, which is effectively the same as.
It's a moist environment. It's going to be.
But they used to say sailors on Arctic patrols they should never touch the railing of the ship with a bare hand because their hand would stick to it, and it would be. A burn is caused by a massive change in temperature upwards or downwards, isn't it? So it would be just like touching a hot frying pan and sticking your hand to that. So, you'd have this thing burning the inside of your penis. So, that was a much needed heating system.
Yeah, on that thought, let's move on. All credit to him for it, but I just don't want to think about that.
Now, he was associated with quite a disastrous project, the F-104 Starfighter, for which he designed the inlet ducts. Now, the F-104 Starfighter has a sorry history. When we talk about the jet age of the sort of late 1940s up to, I suppose, up until the space age of the late 1950s, the United States was embarrassingly late to the party. I mean, Britain had jet aircraft towards the end of World War II, although they wouldn't fly them over enemy territory. They were only used for home defence for fear that they might get shot down and the technology might be captured and reverse engineered, even though the Nazis themselves already had a perfectly good jet plane, the twin-engined Messerschmitt Me-262, which was quite a devastating aircraft. It was 100 miles an hour faster than anything the Allies had over in the enemy skies over Europe. It was so fast they were able to carry out a daylight bombing raid on Antwerp after its liberation without losing a single plane. Whereas conventional bombers they'd be slaughtered in the sky, going up against anyone with air defences. So and this continued into Korea. So when the American-led UN force went to Korea, the Americans still didn't have jets in their air force, and Britain did. Britain had the Gloucester Meteor and perhaps a couple of other new jets by that time, and then they came up against the Russian MiG-15, which was apparently reverse engineered from British technology. That a couple of Russian scientists came over from the Soviet Union and said, can we have a look at your jet engine technology? And the people at Rolls-Royce said, yeah, sure, fine. And apparently when they asked permission from Stalin to go and see if they could get this technology, Stalin laughed and just said, yeah, well, have a punt. But yeah, they got it. So suddenly America was up against jet planes. So they had to rush. There was a jet called the Sabre, which they managed to rush into service for Korea and re-establish their if not air superiority, at least their air parity. And then, of course, after the Korean War, late 50s, they needed something. They needed a new all-weather multi-role combat aircraft to replace the jets that had been rushed into service for Korea. And Lockheed's offering was the F-104 Starfighter, which Ben Rich designed the air intakes. So the US Air Force trialled the Starfighter and said it's not fit for purpose. I mean, if you've ever seen the Starfighter, it looks like a rocket. It's a long sort of tube with a pointy nose and small wings. They said it would probably be fine as an interceptor because it's fast. And only in the clear blue skies over the Arizona desert where we trialled it, but probably not in all weather conditions in Europe. So Lockheed had a problem. The Starfighter was rejected. They didn't know what to do with it. They'd invested tens of millions in research and development for this. So they came up with a wheeze to sell it off cheap at bargain basement prices to the Luftwaffe. They persuaded the West German government to buy the Starfighter in numbers, and the West German government kitted it out in its originally intended role as an all-weather multi-role combat aircraft. And now, of the 900-odd planes that the West German government bought for the Luftwaffe, nearly 300 of them, I think it's 293 or something, crashed, and over 100 pilots were killed in about a 20-year period from when they were taken into service in 1961 up until the late 70s. early 80s. They used to make a joke in Germany, if you want to own a starfighter, just buy a patch of land and wait. Yeah, so Ben Rich was associated with the starfighter. I thought I'd just get that one in.
Yeah, no, that's an absolute good call. And
it was a dodgy arms deal. Money changed hands in darkened rooms, and that's how Germany ended up buying the starfighter. No, sorry,
I'm pretty sure that the world of arms dealing, all of it's dodgy anyway.
It's extremely dodgy, yeah. And of course, if you're a shareholder with Lockheed, you would have made a mint over the last couple of decades, because war is good for business if you've got shares in Lockheed.
Yeah,
It's Lockheed Martin, isn't it? So this Ben Rich has said a number of things, and what we're going to talk about today is we now have the technology to take ET back home. So my first question is,
before we get on to that, I just want to go back on some of the things you were just saying about what he's worked on. So we've discussed previously on the podcast about things like the whole stealth technology potentially being reverse engineered from UFOs, and indeed, the Skunkworks themselves have a vast history of people claiming that they have access to alien spacecraft, alien technology, and things like that basically they have been reverse engineering this technology. There is nothing new about that claim. That's a claim that's been made for a very, very long time. So I just wanted to throw that in there as well as a bit of background before we get into this specific quote. But yes.
Well, he talks about the programs he's been involved in. He said, we did the F-104, the C-130, U-2, SR-71, F-111, F-117, and many other programs that I can't talk about. We are still working very hard. I just can't tell you what we're doing. Well, there could be all sorts of reasons why we can't tell you. They're total fuck-ups and waste of money. That's a reason for not being able to tell you what we're doing. But he has said... He said, we already have the means to travel among the stars, but these technologies are locked up in black projects, and it would take an act of God to ever get them out to benefit humanity. That's what he said.
Can you attribute that quote?
Statement made after UCLA presentation to 3 disclosure project witnesses, he said.
Okay.
But the quote we were talking about...
That sounds like a bit of hearsay, though.
He mentioned ET twice at a UCLA School of Engineering alumni speech on the 23rd of March, 93. He said, we now have the technology to take ET back home. And at a WPAFB slide presentation in 1993, he said, the Air Force has just given us a contract to take ET back home. Well,
now it's interesting you've raised both. So the quote we were focusing on, I mean, you've kind of you've killed the bit I was going to do as a big reveal later, but never mind.
Okay, I've spoiled your show. That's what I'm here for. It's a service. Other services are available.
So, yes, this quote, we now have the technology to take ET home. And you mentioned it's the UCLA speech of 93?
Yes. UCLA School of Engineering alumni speech.
Yeah, this particular speech has been attributed to a number of different speeches that he's made, or it's been claimed that he's made. It's been attributed to a number of private conversations that people allege he had, but there is absolutely no record of it actually happening.
Okay.
So there are claims, nobody has ever backed it up.
Right. So they've just claimed that he said these things and now he's dead, so he can't say, I never said it.
Yep.
I mean, why would he be talking about ET? I mean, 1993, when ET came out in what, about 12 years previously?
Oh, use the term ET as shorthand for extraterrestrial outside of the movie.
Oh no, I thought it was a specific reference to the movie about ET phone home and all this. ET's trying to get home. About that ET, and well, so in I haven't seen the movie all the way through. I just
really
face it. Yeah, really. So where does ET come from?
Extraterrestrial shorthand.
Yeah, but which specifically? Where is ET's home?
Oh,
is it in our solar system or is it
in the movie? We don't know.
So, but what he's implying is we could take a creature. We could take a creature to not of this world, back to its world, somewhere in another solar system, another galaxy perhaps, and it would survive the journey.
Well, here's the interesting thing to talk about taking ET home, and we'll come a little bit more onto that in a bit, but he must know where ET's home is. Like you say, is it this solar system? Is it another solar system? Is it another galaxy? Is it another dimension?
Is it specified in the movie? Does ET get home in the movie?
No. Does ET go home? Spoiler alert. Yes, he does. Well, he departs.
So I don't think.
So canonically,
we could be accused of. We're not going to spoil ET for any of our listeners. Oh, if you reveal what happens to ET, they're not going to say, "Oh shit, I've never seen that. I was going to watch that, and now you spoiled it for me."
Here's a bit of an interesting thing about that specific movie. So we don't in the movie E.T. We don't know where the ship has come from. We don't know where the ship goes to at the end. We just know it goes. But the creatures that E.T.'s race appear in Star Wars.
Oh, do they?
They do.
They with the glowing finger.
Episode 1. They have the glowing finger. They're in the Galactic Senate in episode 1. I think it's episode 1 or episode 2, one or the other. So we do know that E.T.'s race comes from a galaxy far away.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing. In the movie E.T., E.T. himself sees a toy Yoda figure of Elliot's and reacts quite strongly to it. So it is possible. Yes.
So was Yoda in the first Star Wars movie?
Yes, he is.
Okay.
So it's possible that E.T. saw the figure of Yoda, but knew who Yoda actually was. In fact, possibly even knew Yoda personally, and was reacting to that recognition of him. Okay,
so we're talking about the creation of the Star Wars universe, aren't we? Not our real universe. So
no.
E.T.
Yeah, but it's just an interesting little crossover.
And isn't there the sort of rivalry between Spielberg and Lucas that there is between, say, Schwarzenegger and Stallone? That they knowingly reference each other's work.
It's a friendly rivalry, maybe
a friendly rivalry. That's the phrase I'm looking for.
Like us, Neil.
Like us, yeah, like us.
But yeah, that's anyway. That's all. By the by, as a little aside there. Take your digression drink, folks. So, yeah, he would have to know where, like, if he's talking about sending extraterrestrials home, he'd have to know. Are we talking another dimension, another solar system, another galaxy? What are we talking here? Because they're very different engineering problems from each other. So to talk about having the technology, how did he know what engineering problem to solve? And it comes back round to this reverse engineered, they've got alien spacecraft.
And yet, NASA is still struggling to put people on Mars, on our nearest planet that you can possibly land on.
Yeah, but NASA is less a corporate body where people are going to make lots of money.
Did you see the story in the press this week? I think it was, where they're saying that the mission to Mars, because how long does it take to get there? Is it 18 months or 2 years each way?
I don't know.
It's a long way away, and so they only want to send single-sex crews on that mission to avoid the possibility of sex in space. I mean, how naive.
Yeah. Have these people never worked in an army before?
Yeah, I know.
Okay. It's, I mean, why do they want to avoid sex anyway? I can understand them wanting to avoid pregnancy, because that would cause a real problem. Cause an incredible moral issues, and because like if you've not got enough air or food for a fifth human being, like if it's crew of 4, for example, you haven't got air or food for a fifth human being and someone gets pregnant, would it be morally correct to terminate?
Which,
I mean, there's a whole there's a whole set of issues there, right there. But
and would the baby be an alien? You weren't born on planet Earth. Would they?
Well, they'd be an extraterrestrial.
Yeah,
they would be an extraterrestrial by definition. And if they were born on Mars, they'd be a Martian.
I was just thinking maybe they've had issues before with a rogue ejaculation in zero gravity, and everyone gets a bit of it.
Well, isn't it more getting into the equipment? But anyway, Neil, trust you to go down that particular rabbit hole.
Well, I've worked in an office where you come into work in the morning and find pubic hairs in your keyboard. You think, what the fuck goes on here at night?
Oh dear. Right, well, moving very swiftly on. So you mentioned earlier this other quote that he said, where he so this isn't, we don't know which speech particularly this is from, but this quote is, "We've just been awarded a contract to build this," and there's a slideshow of a picture of a flying saucer.
Mm-hmm.
"Just been awarded a contract to build this to fly ET back home." Now, where this comes from, this is not... Nobody can quite work out which speech it was from. However, there's a guy called Steve Justice, who was also a director of Skunkworks. I believe he was the person he was Ben Rich's successor, I believe. But Steve Justice himself is quite an interesting character in ufology terms for a number of different reasons, which we will go into, no doubt, in a future episode. I'm just clocking the time at the moment. But yeah, so Steve Justice, who worked with Ben Rich, when he was going through Ben Rich's things, so obviously Ben Rich passed away, he's going through his previous things. Now, all of Ben Rich's speeches were written out. He didn't ad-lib anything. Everything was all written out well in advance, including references to which slides should be up at a particular time. Everything was meticulously planned. And Steve Justice...
this guy didn't do off the cuff.
He did not do off the cuff, did Ben Rich. And Steve Justice found this quote in a speech saying, "We've just been awarded a contract to build this to fly ET back home." Now, Steve Justice claims not to know of any reason why he said this or anything like that, but he was talking about sort of, well, black projects that he couldn't talk about, basically. So, and it was kind of but I can tell you this.
Well, what I'm thinking, I'm torn because I'm thinking I don't know what he means. He either means, because he at one point in a telephone call to Jim Goodall, at the USC Medical Center approximately 1 week before he died on January 5th, 1995. He says, Jim, we have things out in the desert that are 50 years beyond what you could possibly comprehend. If you have seen it on Star Wars or Star Trek, we've been there, done that, or decided it was not worth the effort. So I imagine for most of the stuff in Star Trek, we've decided building a massive intergalactic space cruiser is not worth the effort. But we could, but we can't be asked. Is he talking about cultural references that, we could send E.T., referred to E.T. in the Spielberg movie? Or is he actually saying we have an extraterrestrial on one of our bases and we've built a craft that can return it to its home planet?
That's the ultimate question, isn't it?
Is that what he's talking about, or is he just saying, "No, he's"? I mean, I got the impression when I read the quotes that he'd seen someone had shown him ET 12 years, showed it on a videotape 12 years after it was released, and he got all excited about it and started claiming that he could do all those things.
It's really hard to gauge. But you know what? Saying, yes, we've got stuff technologically 50 years in advance, I can accept that 100%. Say, if you've seen it in Star Trek or Star Wars, we've explored that as an option 100%. There are companies out there. You look at Star Trek, okay, and when it came out in the 60s, people laughed at it and says, the idea of doors opening automatically when you walk up to them, that won't happen in my lifetime. I mean, go to any supermarket.
Yeah.
And that's what you've got. Handheld communication devices, all inspired by Star Trek.
Well, a lot of stuff comes from science fiction.
In fact, the first ever flip phone was the Motorola StarTAC. And it was called the StarTAC because they couldn't get the license to call it the Star Trek.
Okay.
And I had one. That was the first
I remember
reading,
back in the 1950s or even the 1940s, there's a cartoon character that Americans will recognise more than Brits, called Dick Tracy. He was this detective. And his story was syndicated in various newspapers, but he had a wrist radio. It was like a wristwatch, but with a radio. And it was in the cartoon, we go calling Dick Tracy, buzz, buzz, buzz. And people said, well, that's impossible. You could never fit a radio on your wrist because the valves are too big. In those days, a radio was a piece of furniture in your living room. It was the size of a small armoire, and a small piece of a small cupboard,
vacuum valves.
So but what the suggestion was that you should, if you want to predict the future, science fiction is a better guide because scientists themselves are often constrained by their knowledge of existing technologies and how they would apply that to this and say, well, no, because radios work on valves, so you couldn't fit that. Whereas a science fiction writer is going to say, well, I don't care how it works, I just know he's got one.
Yeah, absolutely.
By some technology,
And we've worked out how to do warp drive now.
Have we?
Yes, there is a Mexican scientist called Alcubierre who has worked out how to do warp drive.
Okay.
Faster than light travel is within our reach. There you go.
Okay. Has he got a craft that can?
He hasn't got a craft. That would take an awful lot of money. He's worked out how to do it.
Worked out the theory of it.
That's the first step.
Okay. He's worked out the theory. Okay. Yeah. My question is this. I was. I grew up during the Cold War, when East and West faced off against each other. Mainly, the United States and its allies against the Soviet Union and its, in inverted commas, allies or conquered territories of the Warsaw Pact. And a war in Europe was unthinkable because it would lead to just Armageddon. And although there were all sorts of proxy wars being fought in places like Vietnam and Angola and Afghanistan, they said, we can't have this actual direct confrontation because it will lead to a nuclear war and we'll all die. Well, suddenly, now that there is actually a war in Europe that Russia has invaded a country which isn't a NATO country, but looked like it was probably on the verge of becoming a NATO country. Certainly, the United States wouldn't give any guarantee it wouldn't become a NATO country. Everyone seems far more relaxed about having an all-out war in Europe now than they were 30 or 40 years ago. So is that because America think they've got this technology that they're just they can just flatten Russia and have no consequences for themselves? Is that what
I have a very
they've got this kind of
theory.
technology? And what's
Very
that?
different theory. So, for one thing, the last time there was a major war across Europe, it's now just about leaving living memory.
Yeah,
It's hearsay. It's become pretty much hearsay. We've heard stories, but people alive, there are very, very few left who actually experienced it, who actually remember it. Add to that, so we become like further removed from it. The horrors of that war are, as a society, further removed from us. So we become more sort of relaxed about it. On top of that, you have various governments who have been actively using propaganda campaigns to paint a rosy picture of life back then, particularly here in the UK. Oh, rosy a picture of what life was like back then. So, yeah, people would be, it's okay if there's another war because we'll be going back to good old values, apparently.
Yeah, it'll be our finest hour and the Blitz
Diphtheria.
spirit and all that. Yeah. Rickets.
Do you know what? They talk about Blitz spirit, shitting yourself under a bit of fucking corrugated iron.
Yeah.
That's Blitz spirit. Living in permanent fear of death from above. That's Blitz spirit.
Or the Dunkirk spirit, being part of an army that's been completely routed and defeated, that's being rescued by small boats that are being bombed to shit. Yeah, that's yeah. I imagine that's pretty hairy as well. Actually, my uncle Alec was at Dunkirk. He was sent to France in 1940 as part of the British Expeditionary Force, and he was actually at Dunkirk. And I always wanted to ask him. I mean, I never used to see him much when I was a kid, and of course he's long gone now. But I always wanted to ask him, when you were stood in the sea, up to your armpits in the water, holding your rifle above your head, standing in those long lines, waiting for some small cabin cruiser to come and pick you up and either take you to Britain or drown you in the middle of the channel. When you were stood there, and Stukas dive bombing you and the like, didn't you ever think, actually, this isn't as bad as I thought it was going to be? Because what they were expecting to do was refight the Great War all over again. It was going to be Passchendaele and the Somme all over again. At least it wasn't that. At least it must be thinking, well, at least I'm going home. I've got a good chance of it. I always meant to ask him that. But I just wondered, why is there... Because it's always been the threat of nuclear war, hasn't it? I mean, they always said, the reason why
for us, certainly.
America was prepared to attack Iraq and over weapons of mass destruction and not North Korea was because North Korea actually does have weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah.
And now we're going up against Russia and then against China. I mean, that's where America's focused now. So do they think they've got technology that's 50 years in advance of anything anyone realizes, and we're going to use it for what we always use our technology for, which is to bomb the shit out of someone?
Maybe. Anyway, we have really digressed and we've reached the end of the show. So let's do our trademark summaries. So Neil, all right, we've talked about this original quote that we sort of sold the show on. Now having the technology to take ET home, I think we can dismiss that. But we've been given a contract to build this to fly ET back home. Is this Ben Rich admitting that they have access to extraterrestrial technologies, that they have access to extraterrestrials, or at least knowledge of them?
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know if I think it's more likely he was engaging in a bit of hyperbole, and he was just very excited about some technological project. And wow, this is Star Wars. Wow, this is Star Trek generation. This is, but it wasn't. He was just.
This is one of those rare occasions when you and I are in agreement.
Are we?
We are, because I don't think he was admitting to anything. I do, just to be clear, I do believe that Lockheed Martin, in particular Skunkworks, have access to extraterrestrial technologies and have been actively reverse engineering them. I do believe that very much.
Okay, that's However, where we part ways.
Okay, and absolutely, I wouldn't expect that to be any different. But the fact that Ben Rich was so meticulous about making his speeches, that everything was written out and planned out in advance, that he didn't deviate, I think there's a lot of people in ufology who romanticize the idea of him slipping up and letting something out. I just don't think that would have happened at all. So I don't think his quote, I think, like you say, his quote is just like, he's talking about E.T., from the movies, not actual E.T. I think he is. He was very much saying, we are far more in advance than you can ever possibly imagine.
Yeah,
I think
but
he
also
was saying that, but that doesn't surprise me.
He works for an aeronautics and armaments company that gets very fat government contracts. Yeah, you want to keep talking yourself up, talking up what you can do and what you can deliver, but so that the US government will give you another $1 billion.
Yeah, and the shareholders will invest.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that must be a difficult business to get shareholders. Like, yes, we've got some wonderful things that are going to make you lots of money, but we can't tell you about any of them. Just trust us. Trust us with your money. Anyway, that's an interesting one.
Yeah, but that was the name of the game in the Cold War. If you don't give us the money to build this thing that we can't tell you about, the others, you can be sure the other side are doing it. So we'll be outgunned.
And saying it to the government is one thing, because you can tell the government what you're actually working on, but to public shareholders when you can't tell them.
And what you can also say to the government is, it's not your money. It's not coming out your own pocket. You don't pay taxes. All your profits go through a network of shell companies in offshore tax havens.
Anyway, we're way over time now, and we're still digressing. So I'm going to pull it back round to a close, and I'm going to say, what do you think, listeners, about Ben Rich and this quote? Have we indeed got it wrong about this original quote, having the technology to take E.T. back home? Because, maybe someone out there is aware of its source and can provide us with evidence. We would love to hear it. In fact, we'd love to hear your opinions in general anyway. You can email them to us, aliensexplored@gmail.com. You can send us messages on Twitter and Facebook by searching Aliens Explored. And of course, all the links are below. And if you are one of our very special, very dear Patreon patrons, you get exclusive access to our Patreon-only Discord server, where you can discuss with like-minded people any thoughts you may have. And I love to see some of those exchanges up there. Join us next time. Do you know what next time is, Neil?
It's our 100th show.
It really is. I am so excited. 100 episodes, and we're doing something a little bit special. We are going to be discussing a man's life and work, and it's a guy we have mentioned many, many, many times on this show, Dr. Stephen M. Greer. So I'll be looking forward to that one. So don't miss that. And we're also on a countdown to episode 102, which is very, very special because that is our 2-year anniversary show. We actually started this podcast on the 31st of July 2 years ago, Neil.
Blimey.
And episode 102 goes out On the 29th goes public. Of course, our early access Patreons, they get it a little bit earlier. They get it a week earlier, but it goes public on the 29th, episode 102. So that's the closest to a 2-year anniversary that we're getting.
29th of July.
Yeah, so we'll need our party hats for episode 102. But in the meantime, we've got, episode 100 next time. Bit of a celebration for that one. Dr. Stephen M. Greer. Don't miss that. In the meantime, do keep watching all these speeches by these Skunkworks directors and others, because you never know what they might slip up with. And of course, what else did we watch, Neil?
The Sky. Or did you just say that?
Watching those skies. Until next time, episode 100. Woo!
Yeah, bye-bye. See you then. Aliens Explored is a Fecal Films production in association with Juicy Falls. Music by Darren Mafucci and editing by Stu Jackson. Find us on Twitter or Facebook by searching Aliens Explored, or visit us on aliensexplored.com.